Welcome to PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm here at Ibrox Stadium where in just over 1 month's time Rangers will take on Greek giants Panathinaikos in the UEFA Champions League Round 2 qualifier. The second leg will of course take place 1 week later in Athens. It will be Russell Martin's first competitive game in charge since taking over as manager. To get an insight into what Rangers will face in the Greek giants, I'm joined by Greek football expert Stephen Contouro. Stephen, first of all, thank you for joining us here on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. To begin with, can we just get a bit of an insight into what the reaction was to the draw, Rangers versus Panathinaikos?
I think for Panathinaikos supporters, and just to be clear, I don't support Panathinaikos, but I cover all of Greek football. But it's probably one of the toughest draw they could have got, I would say. Rangers obviously have a lot of European experience. They obviously reached the Europa League final not too long ago, and I think to start with that draw, it's very tough, and especially with the first leg away. Panathinaikos in the league last season and a couple times in Europe in the Europa Conference League phase last season struggled away from home and were much better at the Athens Olympic Stadium. So having the first leg away will definitely be tough for Panathinaikos. It probably, and if speaking to a couple of friends of mine who are Panathinaikos supporters and who are part of Hellas football, they probably would have said it's one of the hardest teams they could have faced. One of them in particular said they probably would have preferred like a Red Bull Salzburg, who are probably at their weakest at the moment. And while Victoria Pilsen have good experience in Europe, that would have been potentially an easier opponent for them as well over Rangers.
Of course, and there's been a lot of changes here at Ibrox in the last few weeks and months. The club has new owners, there's a new manager in Russell Martin. Not quite sure as well what the team will be by the time this game rolls around, but do you think that uncertainty could play into the hands of the Greek side when they come here?
I think it can come both ways really, because as you said, it's going to be a very new setup for you guys. Russell Martin's come in. We know how he plays, or how he played with Southampton in the Premier League, and maybe a better indication of how he plays when he's at his best is when Southampton in the Championship. But for Panathinaikos, I guess in that respect, they can take an advantage from that because Panathinaikos have a settled manager. They have Rui Vitória, who does have Champions League experience with Benfica previously. There's going to be a more settled team. There's a couple of players that are missing from the team last season that may have left if they were previously on loan or if their contracts haven't been renewed. But generally, it's going to be a bit more of a settled team. But then the problem you always have, and Rangers will obviously have this issue too, is when you play this early on in the qualifiers, you just don't have any time for preparation. You'll barely get a pre-season. And you will barely have time to get players in because players are going to be watching. Your strongest links to transfers are going to be waiting to see what capacity of European football you get into before they commit. And that's something that all of the Greek teams have had to struggle with over the last few years, having not automatically qualified for major European competitions consistently, like in the group stage proper, or as it is now, the league phase proper. So it's going to be tough for both because they're going to be still finding themselves as teams in different ways. But Panathinaikos, if there's any positives they can take, is that at the very least they have probably have a much more settled team. And Rui Vitória has been with the club for over 6 months to 7 months now, so he'll know more or less what team he'll pick for the players that are available to him.
Yeah, like you say, Rui Vitória, he's not been in situ for that long as Panathinaikos boss. Could you just give us more of an insight into what he's like as a manager and what his style of football is?
Well, Vitória being a Portuguese coach, this is very stereotypical of Portuguese coaches, but he likes to control the game, and it's very much a strong defence that he kind of has as the foundation of his teams. So my understanding, especially against a tougher opponent like Rangers, and what we saw against Fiorentina when Panathinaikos beat them 3-2 to begin with in the first leg of I think it was the round of 16 of the Conference League playoffs, Conference League last season. It's going to be I think he'll play a bit more of a counter-attacking style because he'll want to keep that solid defensive line and then take advantage of any spaces that are left behind from the Rangers kind of midfield / defence. And that's the best way, I think, is the best. That's probably the best thing I could say about Vitória and how he's going to play with this Panathinaikos team. He's going to try and soak up the pressure and counter-attack, especially because you guys have some dangerous forwards in, DESEARS in particular, who's been linked with AEK Athens recently and who may or may not still be at the club, depending. And he scored against Olympiacos in the Europa League last season as well. So that'll be definitely one they're going to be keeping an eye on to keep quite quiet if he does feature.
We know it's up in the air at the moment, but if Cyril Dessers was to make that move to AEK Athens, how do you think he would fare in that league given the standard there compared to Scotland?
They're quite comparative leagues, aren't they? Scotland and Greece. I think he'd do well. I think he'd have to really not show up to do badly in Greece as a striker. You know, and even though admittedly the quality's got much better in Greece in like the middling to lower end teams than they have in recent times, I think he would do quite well in AEK Athens, and especially if they can keep Anthony Martial, who's at the club, and Eric Lamela, who both had pretty good patches of the season. I wouldn't say that they were consistently good throughout, but they both showed what they're capable of at different times. So if he can link up well with them, and if they're still at the club, then I think DESEARS could do well if he makes that move, and it'd be a big coup for AEK to get him, considering the season they had, and it's all changed for them as well because they've just brought in a new manager, so they're all kind of starting from scratch as well, and they're in the Conference League qualifiers. So if they don't qualify like they did last season in very embarrassing fashion when they got knocked out by an Armenian team very early on, it's going to be I don't think that'll entice him to go. If they're in Europe of some capacity, I could definitely see him moving for sure.
Who are the danger men then for Panathinaikos? Who should be Rangers keeping a close eye on over these two legs?
Especially in Europe, absolutely, it's Tete. Their kind of Brazilian forward who they brought. He was much more prolific in Europe for some reason than last season. He was fine in the league. He was okay, but in Europe was where he really shined. In terms of other players, Fotis Ioannidis, a Greek international striker who, you know, is mostly the starter, although it's between him and Vangelis Pavlidis in the starting role in Greece. He might play, although he didn't have the best of seasons last year at Panathinaikos. He had a few injury issues. He lost his place a little bit to Carlos Federski, who's a Polish striker who has Greek football experience and went to MLS and has since come back. He was at PAOK previously in Thessaloniki, and he's now at Panathinaikos. He's been Vitoria's choice up front in the latter stages of the season. So whether that carries over to this season or not, and he doesn't, whether he thinks Ioannidis is ready to take back his number one role, both can be quite dangerous. You know, Swiderski had a really strong end to the season, and Ioannidis just scored recently for Greece in our international break, so he's looking a bit more sharp than he did. So those are the big three I would say that Rangers have to look out for.
Everybody knows, of course, this stadium here behind me, it generates a white-hot atmosphere on European nights. We've seen it in the Europa League and the Champions League as well. Do you think that atmosphere, the hostility of it, could spook the Panathinaikos players at all?
I would be surprised if Panathinaikos were intimidated by Rangers' atmosphere. Not that Rangers aren't capable, as you said, of creating amazing atmospheres at their home, but Panathinaikos play derby matches against Olympiakos at Karaiskakis, which, you know, one of the best atmospheres in Europe. You know, definitely not from an Olympiakos supporter talking there, but also, you know, the other big clubs like AEK Athens in their new Hagia Sophia Stadium, really good atmosphere on their day, and PAOK in Dumba up north. You know, they are very used to playing in these very hostile atmospheres, especially because they never travel to derby matches with away fans, because away fans in derby matches are still prohibited in Greek football. So that makes it for an even more intimidating atmosphere, especially when you have no one behind you cheering you on in like a corner of the stadium. So I think it'll be different maybe to what they used to in Greece, but I think they'll be ready for that kind of atmosphere early on because of what they have to deal with on a weekly basis, especially with the playoffs, where they basically play a derby every week once you get to the playoff format.
Stephen, from your experience and from your point of view, how do you expect this tie to go over the two legs?
It's going to be really tough. I think this could go down to the wire, actually. Depending on the preparation and readiness of both teams, because Panathinaikos made one or two transfers early on. A couple have been good, like what's his name? I'm just looking now because Georgos Kyriakopoulos at left back. He's pretty decent. I think Rangers will win at Ibrox. I'd be surprised if Panathinaikos get a victory there. They did okay in the qualifiers last year to qualify for the Conference League, both home and away. So I'm going to say Rangers win at Ibrox, and Panathinaikos win very narrowly at home, and it will go to penalties. I just have a feeling it could go to penalties.
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting when that tie does come around next month, and PLZ Soccer will be keeping up to date with all the build-up and, of course, all the match action as well. Stephen, thank you for joining us on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. Thank you to you for watching, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.